This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation. Hello, all of you. My name is Kądzielska-Koper, and this is Common Sense Generation, a video podcast about community, values, and philosophy. And with me in the studio, straight from Brussels, is Agnieszka Kolek, the head of cultural engagement in MCC Brussels, but I would say a woman of many talents and many professions as well. Agnieszka, thank you very much for showing up here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you here.
Agnieszka, I remember it as when you were a deputy director in Ujazdowski Castle Center, focused on art and actions which were going there. And I would say you have those two faces. You are a very you have a deep knowledge about what's going on currently in politics and a philosophical understanding of modern affairs, let's say. But you very often understand what's happening behind the curtain and where does it come from. But also you have this artistic part because you're an art practitioner yourself. And you co-founder of a movement called Passion for Freedom. So before we go into what's going right now and what's your occupation right now, especially in MCC Brussels, tell us a little bit about your background.
So I think all of the things that you mentioned as part of my history, they are interwoven. It's not something that there is a clear cut that would separate these things. I think, first of all, my sensitivity comes from my deep interest in art and myself having the art education and being an artist. And that was actually my beginning when I moved to London. I moved to become an artist, a fully fledged artist, exhibiting, selling my artworks. I also studied further there to improve my craft, but also knowledge and understanding of the art world. And then I started with my friends. I started curating and co-founding Passion for Freedom Art Festival for all the years happening in London. But since 2019, we've been also working in Denmark, Poland, and currently we are preparing an exhibition in New York City in May 2024. And then that fits into this interest in politics. When I left Poland to go to London, at that time as an artist, I was just interested in my art practice. But then living in London, facing different groups of people coming from all over the world, I started to be more informed about what's going on around the world. And then through the artistic practice and working with artists with Passion for Freedom, I started to learn about what kind of issues real people are facing in different countries around the world. And then artists, quite often being this canary in the mine, they are the kind of warning system letting us know what's going on. And because they are idealists, quite often they would find an amazing way to convey this message in just one image. So through that, I started to be more interested in the politics and trying to understand the forces behind the closed doors and how it translates into everyday life of individual citizens. And then starting to work here at the Ujazdowski Castle in Poland, it was a great opportunity for me to introduce the Polish audience to the issues the artists are facing in Western countries, like Britain, France, Germany. Now I also have a better glimpse into Belgium, what's going on there. And it's been fascinating because it seems that despite of the fact that we have the internet and we seem to have the flow of information, it's very easy to keep people in silos, in bubbles, and construct narratives that would be very easy to take, to digest, and have some kind of conclusions, but that they wouldn't be rooted in the reality of people that they really live in these societies. So, for example, quite often in Poland, people were shocked that when I moved back to Poland from London after being 20 years there, I was saying that there is no freedom of speech in Britain. that people are being threatened, either threatened with death or threatened with losing their jobs. And actually that now there is a big movement coming from the bottom up that people are trying to protect freedom of speech and fight for it. And one of these organizations that does it in Britain is Free Speech Union. And it was a huge shock for the Polish audience then to discover the artists that they have been cancelled from the public life and they cannot exhibit their works in galleries because they would be threatened, they would be hunted down, and quite often the institutions not only would not show their works out of fear of threats of violence, but actually the institutions are suppressing the freedom of expression in Western countries and in the example I'm giving in Britain. So one of the artists that we showed at the Ujazdowski Castle has been Claudia Clare, who has been cancelled 3 times. The first cancellation was in relation to her drawing attention of audiences to the plight of women living under Islam. And because she has family and strong connections with Iran, it was in relation to the Islamic Republic of Iran. The second time she got cancelled and there was a big uproar was because she doesn't agree that prostitution is just sex work and actually is just like any job. She's been very active in helping women leave prostitution. She was working with an organization that does it actively in King's Cross in London. A lot of women that end up in this profession were abused as children, come from very disadvantaged backgrounds. And the third time, when she was completely cancelled and she could only show her work in private homes in Britain, is when she started to discuss the danger of transgender ideology and its impact on women's safety in public spaces, like changing rooms, hospitals, prisons, health centers, and children, the impact on children. So then this relates to my interest in having a bigger impact, being aware that we are at the time where there are international NGOs working on supranational level. We have big organizations and also ways of trying to cooperate countries into signing treaties and agreements that then have to be adhered to in individual countries. So in a sense, we might think we have sovereignty. We might think we have individual nations that decide for themselves what is good for their citizens according to their values, traditions, and also where they want to go to in the future. But being bounded by these treaties, by these agreements on international level, all of a sudden we discover that we have no control over our borders, migration policies, soon over our health system and how we want to manage coming pandemics or any other health crises. And also that more and more we are being restricted by imposed from above very vague laws that are disguised under a good pretense of hate speech laws, which basically remove any freedom of speech and expression because it's very vaguely described. And it leaves the decision of what is seen as hate speech in the eyes of the person that feels or says it feels being offended. This is very dangerous for the future of our societies, not only in Western Europe, but also in Central and Eastern Europe too, and all over the world.
So all of this seems like really the freedom of speech and the freedom of just expression in any form, and you come from an artistic perspective, and you sort of show it how it influences the other part of our life as a everyday life, let's say, the other parts of society, which is not only artists. But you mentioned this very important things that a lot of changes are showed as a red flag somewhere in art, and that's how art is connected also to politics, because we can let's say see our reflection in it in this way, in a more as you said vivid way, especially with one message or something. So that's an extremely interesting thing. But you are right now the head of cultural engagement in MCC Brussels. So tell us first of all how life and looks like in Brussels, because that's living, I would say, on a constant bomb. So something can go off. But with all the protests which are currently going on there. But let's first say, how is life in Brussels?
It's a very interesting place, full of contradictions and at some level also confusion, because it's trying to combine two parts of the country in Belgium, so Flemish side and Wallonia side. So there's Flemish language and French. So you feel this tension in a way things are perceived, in the way things are being communicated. There's a huge bureaucracy, which is a big pain. And a lot of expats are complaining about it, that this is one of the disadvantages of living in Belgium and in Brussels, that it's severe and very difficult to get through, and with lots of delays and complications. And the weather is not forgiving. Most of the time it's raining horizontally. So I have a secret fantasy of having a collection of different raincoats and Wellington boots and various types of umbrellas, but they have to be reinforced. They cannot just be any umbrella because the wind is so strong that you would have to change your umbrella every 3 months.
So this sort of remodeled your closet and your dreams about shopping.
Yes, definitely. And also what is quite amusing is that a lot of people say to me, well, you lived in London, you should be used to rain. It's normal, right? I'm sorry, Brussels is special.
This is Common Sense Generation. If you like this channel, please subscribe, share, and comment. Your voice really matters. Okay, I can believe that. But what's going right now in Brussels? And this is this extremely interesting topic which I want you to talk with you about, is of course the fact that a lot of farmers are protesting, and the way how they are doing it is, of course, making whole Europe a little bit gobsmacked, because just shooting in the center of Brussels with just simply the
manure.
cannon. Yes, exactly, and a cannon of shit. Let's say that's obviously a little bit outraging, but also very funny. But the topic behind it is not funny at all. So the question is, of course, is it the end of a traditional agriculture in Europe? Are we going to have farmers in Europe in 5-10 years, or is it over with this new green project, green plan of European Union?
So I think this is a question for all of us to ask ourselves, because I don't think this is just about the farmers. This is about the nature of our society, our independence as individual countries and societies within them. It's all related to the Green Deal. Obviously, between regions of Europe, there might be slight differences on what the farmers are asking for in relation to specificity of the agriculture there. But overarching issue is the Green Deal. And what does it mean for farming? And at MCC Brussels, we took it at the core of what we've been doing. We published a report at the end of November, and we had an event also with the farmers from Flemish farmers, and there were also some Dutch farmers joining in. And it's all about the regulation constantly changing, the regulations being more and more time-consuming to be adhered to be introduced into life. So that might seem as not such a big problem, right? Because it seems bureaucracy is growing everywhere, so why farmers should be exempt from that? But the issue is that with these ever-changing regulations, it makes their businesses not viable anymore. Farming requires time, knowledge, and an ability to put things into practice. And if you make certain decision, you cannot reverse it easily. So it's not type of a profession where you are completely detached from the consequences of your action. So if the farmer, following the regulations, had to make a big investment, and we focus on the family of Daisy and Günther Klassen, who took bank loans to meet the regulations, and now the regulations have changed. So soon that will put them on a kind of a red line that their business would not be viable anymore if they again don't follow the new regulations and reduce the livestock of the chickens they are producing. That would make them bankrupt, and bankrupt on the personal level. And this is a family with 2 children. So this would also go on their children. And this is the case with all of the farmers, with the smaller and medium-size farmland in Europe. And it would be that either they are forced into bankruptcy, or they would be forced into selling their land much cheaper and creating like conglomerations, agricultural conglomerations, which in a sense, what is interesting with that is that it opposes the idea of the Green Deal, of protecting the environment and creating better environment for all of us. Because actually the heavy industrial agriculture is much more harmful to the environment than the smaller and medium farms that are family-based. The other issue is with the regulations that are being pushed to be introduced by 2027 is creating this land that would be not used for farming, but would be used for offsetting the carbon footprint by big businesses. And it's pushing forward that the farmers should stop farming, stop having livestock, but instead of that, make money on this carbon offsetting, becoming like kind of land managers. And we call it carbon farming. What is problematic about that is that in order to do it, it might sound good on the label that, well, it's just a different way of making money, maybe actually better because they will not work so hard. They would be just monitoring the carbon offsetting and making money out of air and soil. No, it's not so great because you need a very expensive equipment, measuring system, monitoring system. So the first kind of investment would be up to 130,000 euros that you have to pay upfront to create this monitoring system within your land.
And then the regulations are going to change in another 5 years.
That's also possible.
Down.
Also, to maintain it, you have to pay every 5 years another 40,000 euros. I'm talking here using numbers from the report by Thomas Fazi. He's a researcher based in Rome, and he wrote a big research for us on carbon farming. So I would also advise the viewers to go to our publications on our website, MCC Brussels, to read in detail what it means. And obviously, the smaller and medium farmers wouldn't have the money to invest in this monitoring system. So again, we're going back to these bigger agglomerations having land and controlling then the food prices and profiting from this carbon farming. Not to mention that we don't know whether that would really work on a practical level, whether we would really see a big change in the reduction of the emissions and it would be really so beneficial for all of us. Not to mention what it should concern us as citizens is the food security. If we're not going to have our own food farmed on our own land, and it's 38% of European land that is used for farming, who's going to produce our food? Where is it going to be brought from? Doesn't it create gas emissions if we bring the food from abroad, from another continent, another country? And what if we have more chaos in the world as we have now, since the pandemic? So first of all, we had the first rehearsal with the pandemic, what happens when the situation drastically changes. And then if we rely on the medical supplies just from one part of the world, what kind of situation does this create when we could be easily blackmailed? The prices could be manipulated and we have no choice. We have to buy because this is the only source of, let's say, medical supplies. And then this is farming.
Extremely scary because we took the almost all the production out of Europe in order to make it cheaper there, especially in China. So we have very little amount of actual producing anything here in Europe, except maybe some parts of things, but not. And right now, if we want to give up totally farming and creating food, which also brings this element that this is a fresh food when it has to, let's say, travel 100 kilometers in order to come to our plate, and not 1,000 kilometers or even more, then that right now it's become scary, truly scary, especially as you mentioned with everything was going on, especially right now the war in Ukraine, war in the Middle East. So if anything, then this is the threat of a life of every citizen in Europe.
Yes. Also, what is interesting here that this carbon farming is being seen as a very attractive way of making money on the financial market, because this carbon offsetting is also subject to trading on the market. So there's been in Thomas Fuzzy report, it mentions buying the land for these purposes by big banks, investment groups, equity firms. So I see it as a huge threat to the food security for us as ordinary citizens. So I don't see it as an issue just for farmers, but for all of us, to ensure that, first of all, there is transparency of decision making. Who is invested in this? What do they get out of it? And then can we be part of this conversation and looking in the long term and looking at how that would affect us? Because I would hate to see a situation that at first, when you make plans on paper, you make computer modeling, you can have wonderful results. So you can have a year, 2 years. But then let's say 10 years passes and there is a famine and people are dying out of hunger. And then you cannot just easily go back to farming. These things take time.
Yes, this is what you mentioned. We've talked a little bit backstage before starting this conversation, is the fact that the farming is a way of life, and those are practices which you have to have certain skills, which you have to know how to do things. You have a relation to nature, have a relation to animals, and this also gives you a certain space of freedom. This element of freedom is a common topic in this conversation. But when you live on your own land, then you can feel free there. You are a different citizen than a citizen, sort of put in the big city in his or her small apartment. So farmers are this class of people who still feel that they are sort of responsible for part of the land they are living on, but they are also kings and queens of this part. Mm-hmm. And when the new regulation comes and wants to take away all of this, when they have to sell it back to the big companies, and you mentioned, or just do this carbon producing, this changes traditions and ways of life which go through generations.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think what you mentioned is important, that when you are in professions that are related to there are consequences to your actions, to your decisions, and you get results really quickly, and it's not something that you have to wait years for. You are more aware of reality of life. You have more common sense. And it's not so easy to dupe you into ideologies, into movements. It's not easy to sell you some kind of a new trend and for you to say, great, yeah, let's do it. Because you are much more closer to the land, to consequences of your actions and decisions, and seeing the results. So you are more resistant. Being able to do things with your own hands, being able to work together, because obviously when you work in a small community where there is no services, food delivery on a bicycle, someone coming and fixing anything that breaks in your house. You do it yourself. You do it with your friends. You do it with your neighbor. You all go to the same church or same worshiping place. You have very strong connections as the community, so you are not easily manipulated. You're also much better able and prepared to organize yourself instead of being on a paycheck, living from paycheck to paycheck in a more and more atomized society, like we see in huge cities like London, more and more in Warsaw, which is a very worrying trend, where you don't have strong connections with other people in your community. Quite often you might not even know the names of your neighbors, and you rely more on going on antidepressants than actually seeing the results of your work that you do with your own hands and getting the joy and strength from being closely connected with other people. When you live in the city, you see people either as someone that could contribute something to you, be some kind of like a tool for your own ends. So let's say you'd be interested in someone coming to fix your toilet, but not necessarily whether they are having good life or not. You pay them, you get the job done, and you want them out of your life. Where if you are in a rural community, no matter what kind of a job people do, you see them more as humans as a whole, because you know that each one of them contributes, and without them, you would be much poorer. And rural communities are also communities that they guard our traditions and guard our national heritage, being aware of the history, continuity, because it's part of the fabric of the rural life.
This, what you are mentioning right now, is of course something which affects life, especially of young people in big cities, which is this element of just taking people out of their roots totally when they are isolated, usually working for big companies with no this personal responsibility for what they're actually doing, as you mentioned. And then the farmers are a different type of people, and they have the contact with the land. And when you also see the value of land, I would say in this case, it is something maybe as we go back to go with the wind. But this is this value that that you remember that the fruit of your own work is out there in the land, and you cherish it. So I'm maybe not surprised with how far is this ideology of green energy going, but because I wouldn't say it's not important to protect the environment. Of course, it is important. We all don't want to live in a very dirty environment with dirty air and water and no possibility to swim in a lake or in the river. Of course not. But as you mentioned, that even if it's this Green Deal, even if it's vague under the beautiful slogans, the real effect of it might be quite opposite. Because if we take people away and we put a huge companies in it, they don't give a damn about those small part of land, animals there, or something which was going on. But this is actually something against the law of subsidiarity, when we want things to be resolved on the smallest level, because we know if the people living somewhere, they have the best ways and ideas how to resolve those problems. In this case, the rule of subsidiarity, just go to the closet and just flush in the toilet, no more of it. So this is really scary. Do you see if those protests have actually any effect on the bureaucrats in Brussels, or they are completely shut to the voices of people?
I think because the elections are coming, they're taking notice and they're trying to mitigate, find ways how to negotiate with the farmers and maybe in a sense introduce slight changes to the targets, because we have to remember that this is all related to targets. So it's not like a decision that it's made just for now. This is related to targets. So they took upon themselves the targets of reducing the carbon footprint by 2030. So they might, before the election, say, "Oh, we're going to delay it, and it's going to be later in a few years' time," or it might be there might be a slightly different way of calculating it. But if they've been so invested in working together with big businesses and with financial institutions and multinational NGOs, I am afraid that these are just promises to get over the elections, and we cannot be certain that they would honor these promises and whether they would not be reversed or rephrased to create an illusion that actually something has changed when nothing has changed, and we go back to the same place as where we were before. I think there's too much money invested and people are too greedy, seeing the possibility of making money on carbon farming, to just give it up because of small, medium farmers. So I think that's why as well there is an attempt to keep it contained, that is just about farmers. It's not related to us as citizens and digital control and the way to regulate our life through different means. And obviously food security is really important. So I would be very careful, and I wouldn't trust that these changes could come. It's just an election game, and all of us need to support the farmers in their fight, because it's also about us.
It's about us, as you mentioned, the fact that we all have to eat. This is this element we cannot deny as human beings. But what you mentioned, this is a little bit scary. But how do you think this is a bigger question? And I don't want you to, because I don't know if there is a good answer to it. But why do especially in bureaucrats in Brussels, believe so strongly in the religion of environmentalism and the religion of protecting the nature, which goes across everything what we already have in our culture, for example, agriculture, and the history and a tradition of doing things.
So I'm going to admit that, in a sense, I'm going to openly and curiously try to investigate this in this area after your question, trying to think creatively. I have a suspicion that there are different things coming together as a kind of factors playing their role. I still lived in London when Extinction Rebellion started to make protests. And one thing that really shocked me was the amount of money it needed to be staged, also on a theatrical level. And at that time, I'd looked at that as an artist and a co-founder of Passion for Freedom Art Festival, and I thought, where do you have the money from? These things cost money. It's not cheap. I've been fundraising for Passion for Freedom. We collect every pound, every euro, every dollar. It's all from collections from ordinary people. And I know how much things cost. So I suspect that this is in the interest of the global elite to create a panic, to create the climate change emergency. Language is the key to whatever is happening. If you find the way to name things, to create a certain impression, you create a certain narrative, then it's much easier to direct people in the direction that you wish to direct them to. Climate change ideology is a great way to create a way how to restrict people's lives and then to even subscribe to that with almost religious fervor. It's not just about really saving environment, because that I don't deny. We should look after the environment. We should be creative about how to do it. But creating ways how to control citizens' lives using this, it's another matter. Whether you drive a car, are you allowed to drive a car? Were you allowed to drive your car? Are you allowed to live in this building or that building? Because now it's with farmers. There are other reductions of the greenhouse emissions gases that are coming forward with the Green Deal, and they are related to buildings. So that will also come through taxations. And that...
There is already a tax even in Poland when it comes to Green Deal, how much carbon emission is your building producing, which is obviously scary because it starts to threaten people with in their everyday life with something which is, we don't really know if it has a real effect on environment anymore. But the narrative, as you mentioned, is in this moment when we feel a threat, okay, I'm doing something against the goodness of nature. The polar bears are drowning and starving because of my car. I have to switch on a bike. And we see that this is very vague and not really proved to many levels of when it comes to scientific proofs. But on the other hand, this really truly becomes a religion, as you mentioned, and this religion which is so taken away from an ordinary life.
But I see it actually that for the masses it's a religion. For the masses it is sort of a cult. But for people that are inventing it, it's not. They know what they're doing. For the masses, it's a sort of a belief system because there's been a huge secularization of the societies in the West. People are drifting around. People are looking for something to hold on to feel sense of life, to have meaning in life, to have a sense of community and belonging. The community now is more and more built online, not in real life. So it's very easy to be in some kind of vague community that has got certain rituals, slogans, when it's mostly online and doesn't relate to life here, where you have consequences of your decisions. And the more hysteria you whip up, the more emotions you build up, the easier it is to spread it via social media. It also... I think it's also combined with how Greta Thunberg was used as this icon for the children, where it's also interesting that in our culture now, the roles are reversed. We are supposed to listen to the children. And it's not to say that the children don't have anything to say, but I wouldn't be listening to a child about complex matters that we as adults are trying to understand and go and read in different sources to understand the full picture, to then listen to the child telling me that not only she knows how things should be done and I should do it now or else, she's threatening basically, but also she decides not to go to school in order to do that, which is a complete reversal of everything. So as a child, not going to school, you know how to solve big issues that we're trying to work out as adults, and you're threatening me to do it now.
Yeah, with a very, very emotional message and sort of hysteria, which was created by media on many levels. But if we have the same case when it comes to heart surgery or something, no one would allow her to go in an emergency room or an operating room. But when it comes to such things as creating the policy of for future generations or for a lot of people when it comes to environment, of course, let the child decide. And this, I'm not personally attacking her because I think she was used and manipulated on many levels, but this is obviously against the common sense. And that's what we are talking here about. So how to lose the common sense. And right now, let's say the farmers are this bastion of common sense, and they are fighting for it because this is their way of life and they are connected to earth and their land. And this is a difficult fight. We saw it how at least in Brussels, it is where this funny example how there was a blockade for the protest of the farmers, but the police didn't make the blockade on the bike road and on the pavement for pedestrians, because obviously, well, no one will drive on the bike road, yes. So the farmers just looked at them and like, guys, you are just so disconnected from the reality and just drove around the block because on the pavement. And this is, I would say, a symbol a little bit of what's going on. It's sad to say. I don't want us to be only criticizing, but definitely there is this message and this call: go back to reality of living and think about the day of every ordinary people, because this is important, and especially when it comes to agriculture and farming, because this is what we eat here in Europe. We had already pandemic, we have a war right now. We don't want to have a famine.
I agree with you. It's very important.
And this is our point. This was Common Sense Generation. Agnieszka Kolek, the head of cultural engagement from MCC Brussels, was our guest. I hope you liked this speech and this conversation. Please subscribe our channel, share what we do, because we need your support and your voice. And I thank the Polish National Foundation for making this video podcast possible. This is Common Sense Generation.